Namaste, everyone. My name is Avinash Anand Singh. Welcome to the recent episode of Being Iconic with Avinash Anand Singh. Today, we have a very interesting guest. We have Professor Raj Raghunathan, who is a professor of marketing at McCombs School of Business in University of Texas, Austin. Professor Raj, from Indian origin, he did his education from BITS Pilani and went to do his MBA from IIM Calcutta. And later on, he completed his PhD from Stern School of Business, New York. He's also a very successful author. His book, If You Are So Smart, Why Aren't You Happy, is one of the bestsellers. He also teaches a very famous course on happiness online on Coursera platform, which is called as Life of Happiness and Fulfillment. And it's another course now, which is launched on EDX. It is called as Happy Employees and Return on Investment course, which is, the acronym is HEROIC, right? He's also recognized as the Marketing Science Youngest Scholar in 2005 for his contribution to marketing, and also awarded the prestigious NFS Career Award of $440,000. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed this show with Professor Raj. Professor Raj, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, my pleasure. When I saw that award of $440,000, one thing is clear: happiness makes you a lot of money, right?
That particular award was for a different project, not for the happiness project, just so you know. Yeah, but I mean, there is a lot of interest in happiness, a lot of research going on currently on happiness. It is a big topic, for sure.
Right, sure. So to start with, I went through your autobiography, and I will encourage all the listeners to just Google it on your website. Very interesting one, short, but it was such fascinating journey. And I hope you publish a book on this as well. But can you take us through your childhood and the initial years of what kind of mindset you had growing up, and then how your engineering and the kind of things you went through, and the experience of marijuana as well, right? That was something which was a very catchy thing. So can you just quickly go through the entire childhood experience you had?
Yeah, I had a kind of a typical childhood, I suppose. During that time of that time in India, I was, in a middle class family. My father was working for the railways, kept getting transferred around. So I saw a lot of India through growing up. And during those days, there wasn't a lot of concern about what is now called stranger danger, right? That is my child going to fall into some kind of a dangerous situation because some lunatic is going to, take out a gun and start shooting people. At least in the US, there's a lot of that. In India, perhaps we don't have the fear of guns, but maybe somebody's going to kidnap my child or going to come in harm's way. So my parents just let me loose on the streets. I would just go around and come back before dark usually. But even if I didn't, I don't think there was a lot of concern that, this is a dangerous neighborhood, or they just assumed that, yeah, you must be at a friend's, and they started calling people and things like that, which gave me a lot of trust in the universe, I would think. And it also made me quite independent in terms of making my own decisions. So one thing that stands out is in my second grade, I think it was the first or second grade, very early on, I had to transfer a bus in order to get to my school. So you're taking a public bus. You have to go to a bus depot kind of a place, get off one bus and go into another bus. And then that bus would take you to the school. And likewise coming back. So imagine as a 6-7-year-old child, I was doing this journey by myself. Okay. And you know how crazy bus depots are in India, right? Very crowded, chaotic, noisy, a lot of heat, smoke. So I think that in a way, I'm very fortunate to have had that kind of I wasn't mollycoddled, I was kind of let loose. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence in myself that I could solve problems or make decisions, and made me more independent and stimulation seeking and exploratory, okay, which I think a lot of kids nowadays are missing. I was very interested in the topic of happiness from a very, very early age as well. And I was very interested in this idea of, enlightenment, if you will. So maybe through reading Amar Chitra Katha, I don't know if you have read it. It used to be very popular when we were growing up, but there were stories of different kinds of, people, including Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and things like that. I would read these stories and I would want to be in a state of enlightenment. I would want to be happy always, and be completely fragmented inside of me, harmonious, and whatever the manifestations of being in a state of enlightenment are. I wanted those. So that's another thing that kind of stands out. And you asked me about the marijuana experience. Yeah, that came later, obviously.
Yeah.
When I was going to engineering and later on. Um, it's very interesting. When you look at reality, most people assume that the version of reality that they see is the only reality there is. Okay. And I think some of these mind-altering substances, and nowadays, there's other ones that are growing in popularity, including psilocybin, which is the active chemical inside mushrooms, ayahuasca,
Right.
things like that I personally feel are good to partake of once in a while, just to expand your horizons. Okay,
Right.
obviously you have to do it in a setting that's legal and things like that, and
Yes.
it's not for everyone. And if you, I'm not saying that everybody has to do it or anything like that, but I just think that our assumptions about what reality is, how people are, what the universe is about, etc., is often more narrow than it could be. It would be beneficial for people from the standpoint of being compassionate, from the standpoint of being creative, from the standpoint of wondering and really kind of almost having that goosebumpy feeling of what a beautiful universe we live in. It's so expansive.
Right.
It's so mysterious. That feeling, for us to get that, sometimes it's useful to have those kind of experiences. And it's not necessarily that you have to do it through marijuana or through ayahuasca or anything like that, but I think it does help. There is a book by Michael Pollan which just came out, How to Change the Mind. It's on this topic, okay, that I would recommend to people who are interested in digging deeper. And even atheists like Sam Harris, right? There's a book called Waking Up.
Right.
And he talks about how it can be a spiritually awakening experience to partake of these things sometimes.
Right. Right. So now, Professor, I think somebody like you being in the academic field, right, doing a lot of research on happiness and things like this. Now, if you look back to your childhood and especially the education part, the primary, secondary education you went through, what role do you feel that the education played? Like critically looking at, do you feel that what people say, the education becomes a blockage, right? Because it creates a conditioning and narrows your abilities and the kind of gifts you have, and then suddenly exploring a different world wherein we try all these things, being a rebel. And like I read your biography, you went and did everything, and no, your intention of going to BITS also was to run away, far away from your family, like to have the freedom and all that stuff, right? What, how significant the schooling is, and currently the one we have in our society, how, what kind of detrimental effect it has on people, on the kids possibly?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why the current education system, not just in India, but universally, does not do enough. Okay, I don't know if overall I would say that it's detrimental. I think it's good to have education, and I think by and large, educational institutions around the world do more good than harm,
Right.
is my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. You can categorize knowledge into different kind of buckets. Okay. There is knowledge on skills and aptitudes, and I think that we do a reasonably good job on that dimension. If you want to learn math, if you want to learn about science, about physics, about chemistry, etc., I think educational institutions around the world, by and large, do a good job. Okay, we become more skilled at understanding phenomena and in using materials to our advantage, in building bridges, for example, or in coming up with a marketing plan, etc. We are better at it than, say, people might have been 200 years back. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Okay, and a large part of that is due to the education. Okay, so on the skills dimension, I think we do a pretty good job. I think on the morality dimension, perhaps not so good a job. Okay, I think that implicitly or explicitly we're given the message that what counts as success is becoming more rich, more famous, more powerful, more wealthy, more higher status, and so on. And I think that there's not as much attention paid to who's paying the consequences of all this desire for progress. Okay, if everybody wants to become richer and all that, and own a bigger piece of land and a larger house with a swimming pool and consume a lot of energy, it's coming from somewhere. Somebody has to bear the cost, and usually it's the earth. By that I mean other animals or environment, rivers, etc. So on the moral dimension, I don't think we do as good a job, and I think we do a particularly bad job when it comes to the happiness dimension. Okay, so you can think about skills as one thing. You can think about whether you're being a good person as another thing. And the third dimension is, at the end of it, are we making people happier? Are we making them lead a happier, more fulfilling life? And on that dimension, I think our education systems do a particularly bad job. And you can break that topic down into things like, alignment between what your interests are and where you seek your job, right? Which is a very, very important determinant of your happiness. If you're not doing something that you enjoy doing, you're probably not going to be happy. And yet, our education systems hardly ever really talk about this topic. Let's sit down and identify where your core interests are, where your aptitudes are, what your strengths are. We're just basically left to kind of, okay, go figure it out by yourself. All we're going to give you is skills. You got to figure out, introspect and figure out where you want to work. Okay. We're not even going to tell you what avenues are available for you. There's no topic like that. What are the emerging jobs? Okay. I don't recall taking a class like that. And I don't think it's still, even to this day, available in most places. Okay. So you can think about those as two kind of, three buckets rather. And then you can think about another kind of completely different way to categorize, which is declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. Okay. Declarative knowledge is facts, the what of things, when was something, when did something happen? For example, what date it happened, and what is the kind of table of elements. Okay. Then there is procedural knowledge, which is how of things, how do you ride a bicycle, right? How do you play the guitar? Okay. How do you meditate? And I would argue that for your happiness, procedural knowledge is often more important than declarative knowledge. And yet we focus almost exclusively on declarative knowledge and very little on procedural knowledge. Procedural knowledge is left up to you to discover outside of your education. You go and learn to play tennis, you go and learn to meditate, etc. Very little of procedural knowledge, which again means that, we're not really coaching people for happiness.
Right. Yeah. So now coming quickly before I jump on your core expertise of happiness, quickly, how was your Vipassana experience? I read you also went through Vipassana, and I just missed reading that article you have posted also. But quickly, because I've been through Vipassana as part of my post-graduation, it was a mandatory thing in our college. So first year I had a good time.
Which college is this? Which college is this?
We did my postgraduate from a college in Pune. It is called as Sadhana Center for Management and Leadership Development. Professor M.S. Pillai, who was the founder of Symbiosis, SMHRD, he was the founding director of Sadhana. So in the first year, we were exposed to yoga, workouts, and meditation as a compulsory part of the curriculum. So for me, that was the initiation in the spiritual understanding of things. So how was your experience of Vipassana?
I really liked it a lot. I'm a high stimulation seeking kind of a person and an extrovert, and usually talk a lot. So most people felt that I wouldn't be able to survive 10 days of total silence. And as you know, it's not just a mere silence, it's noble silence, right? Where you don't even look at people in the eye. I mean, ideally, that's how it's supposed to be. And so I myself also felt that this was going to be a huge challenge. But, I've been teaching now for 20 years. And at that time, when I went to the Vipassana retreat, it was 2012. So I'd been teaching for 12 years. And even though I was a bad student myself, in many ways, I wouldn't attend classes unless I was forced to and things like that. I felt that, being a good student is very important. Now that I was a teacher, right? The shoe's on the other foot. So I didn't like it when students would come in late into class, for example, or had their cell phones open, or were chatting with each other, not paying attention, etc. So I told myself that in Vipassana for those 10 days, I'm a student and I'm going to be the best student I can be. Okay, I'm going to be the best student I can be. I'm going to do everything that they ask me to. Doesn't matter what state I'm in. Okay, even if I haven't slept very well, if they say, okay, come and meditate and pay attention, I'm going to do that. And that's what I did, and I took it one day at a time. There were, times like after the second or third day when I really felt like I wanted to leave. I couldn't take it, but I just said, okay, I'm just going to give it another half a day or another one day, and just took it one step at a time. And then by the end of it, I had a really miraculous experience. I mean, you should read that thing. I had a very bad back, and the backache got cured through that Vipassana experience in a very weird way. Okay, it'll take time for me to kind of go through that. But so I don't know if it was because I took it seriously or what, but it's just one of those, sometimes people ask you this question, tell me something really weird that's happened in your life. Okay. And I think that that's the story that I would say. That's the most
Right.
weird thing that has happened, where I had a bad back, I had a herniated disc. They took fMRI, a CAT scan of my back, and there was no doubt, there was a herniated disc, and that got cured through that Vipassana experience. So overall, I have very positive feelings about it. Not just physically, that happened, but also because mentally, it was very nice to get that period of total silence and just sink into the moment. And looking at nature, these birds building a nest together, it's just such a beautiful thing to watch. The progression of building of a nest by two birds who are obviously a pair or something. When do you get to see that, right? Like actually in front of your eyes, two birds, two robins, red, beautiful birds building a nest. And I saw it unfolding. I didn't see the whole nest being built, but parts of it through about 3 or 4 hours of just observation. But it was just so interesting to see it. They just be flitting around and go and pick up the right appropriate blade of grass or dry twig and bring it over and then fit it into the structure. And then sometimes both of them would be there together, and then they'd obviously be communicating about whether this piece is good or not. I don't know what they were doing, but overall they were building the nest, and it's just so beautiful to watch it. And just the slowing down of life, so that you can kind of observe what's going on at the micro level is a beautiful experience.
Right. And I think a lot of spiritual teachers also talk about the aspect of cleansing your consciousness. Your mind is so active, so much of chaos going on. And what you mentioned is such a mundane experience of two birds making a nest, which is possibly unnoticed by people in the city or in the villages, right? But suddenly, when you bring a level of silence in your mind, suddenly the reality which is existing starts appearing differently, right? So do you feel that we don't see reality as it is, but in what state or what kind of mindset or mind we are holding in that point of time?
Yeah. There's a quote by Anais Nin. It goes something like this. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are.
Right.
We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. Another kind of similar kind of a quote is, when you smile, the world smiles at you. Okay.
Right.
So your mindset has a big influence on how you perceive reality to be. And in the context of mind-altering substances, we talked about this a little bit with marijuana and ayahuasca and all that. There is a concept called set and mindset, right? Or setting and set and setting. And set refers to mindset. What is your mindset? Are you in a happy state or not? And setting refers to the environment. And the effect that a particular mind-altering substance is going to have on you, what kind of experience you're going to have, whether it's positive, whether it's growth-oriented learning versus something that's evoking paranoia in you and it's not at all useful, really depends on your mindset and the setting, the environment in which you have it. If it's like a beautiful environment, you're with friends, etc., you're going to have a more positive experience and a learning experience. So there's no doubt at all, that your attitude, what you bring, the space between your ears is a super critical determinant of the reality that you experience.
Right. Yeah. When I was reading your autobiography, and I saw, mention about when your cousin got into IITs, the top rankers, and you felt a bit of insecurity or maybe left out, and then things like building the self-image, the confidence, going for getting clear the BIT, and then things like getting fascinated with these drugs, and same time the thing in IIMs wherein you went to the desk culture and all the stuff. Now, with all that kind of experience, and today being a leading professor and kind of world authority in the way of the topic of happiness, what is kind of the philosophy of life you have right now? Do you have a concrete philosophy through which you look at life through those lenses? Or is it like you experience life moment by moment as it comes up? Or is it something definite you have in the mind now?
See, what is my philosophy of life? That's a very broad question, I don't know which particular angle to take on it. I think that you can take the angle of what are my core set of values, okay? You can also take the angle of what set of priorities I have. And to some extent, there is some overlap between those two topics. Let me just break it down into a couple of things. Okay, first of all, I think it's very, very important to, in my opinion, okay, I mean, this is all about opinions and people might differ, and it's great that people differ on this. In my opinion, it's very, very important to not lose sight of what kind of things make you happy. Okay. And ultimately, in my opinion, life is about leading or having a set of experiences that make you feel positive, that give you a sense of satisfaction or happiness or fulfillment, meaning, etc. Okay, whatever set of words you want to use to refer to that emotional aspect of life. If your life at the end of, when you're in your deathbed, if you look back on your life and you say that, look, I've had a very rich emotional life, overall, there's nothing that I would really regret. Okay, that is a good life to have led. Okay, and to prioritize that and see that is important. To me, it's a very, very important thing to do. Because if you don't do that, then it's very possible that you get distracted by other things. Be it money or fame or power or ego or just mindlessness and doing things that don't give you satisfaction, they're boring, etc. You just kind of get swept away by what the crowd is telling you to do. That you look back on your life at the end and you think, what a waste that was. That I had so many opportunities to do so many beautiful things, and here I am at the end of it, and I have a lot of regrets. Okay, that's not a good life. So I think that prioritizing and recognizing leading a life of happiness and fulfillment is very important. Is one priority I have. Okay, the second thing that through prioritizing this happiness and fulfillment that I've discovered, and I'm in a good position to be able to do this because I'm a professor and I'm now teaching a class on happiness. So I look at a lot of research on this topic, and I don't really restrict myself to the scientific community either, right? I mean, I'm also somebody who's open to spiritual traditions and the old religions and so on. So what I've gathered over time is that in the process of prioritizing happiness and leading a life of fulfillment and meaning, you come to the conclusion that perhaps the most important thing to do here is, ironically, not to worry too much about your own problems, but to be of service to other people, but to look up and see what is going on in other people's lives and get engaged with that and try to help them out. You don't have to do big things like, donate $1 million to some kind of orphanage or things like that. It's great if you can do it. But you just kind of on a day-to-day basis, for the people that you come across, and usually it's your family and your close friends, be the best version of yourself that you can be for them and help them out in many ways, small ways. I mean, if they're going through my son lost a tennis game and he's feeling really down and out, okay, and I might be frustrated as well that he did not do his best or play his best game, but rather than take it out on him and be angry with him, to try and make him see, how this is a learning experience and good things will follow. You keep practicing and keep doing your thing, that kind of a thing. So those are some things. I mean, prioritizing happiness and fulfillment and recognizing that compassion, kindness is a very, very important thing. Yeah.
So now, introduce now how for a layman you will define the term happiness. What is happiness from a scientific aspect, but in a more layman understanding? What would be happiness?
Yeah, so I talk about happiness as being an umbrella term that captures a lot of different kinds of experiences and emotions under it. Okay,
right.
So first of all, I don't think anybody would argue that happiness is definitely going to be higher if you have a lot of love in your life, a lot of joy in your life, a lot of hope, a lot of gratitude, a lot of laughter, a lot of interest, a lot of engagement and awe. Okay, there's maybe 10, 12, 15 different kinds of positive emotions that we all go through, okay, which are very familiar to us. And all of those are accommodated under the umbrella of happiness, okay? So if you have a life in which most of the time you're either in love, okay, not necessarily romantically in love, right? You're in love with playing the guitar, right? Love with watching a sunset, love with your pet, right? So you're in love, or you're feeling joyful, or you're feeling serene and tranquil, or you're feeling hopeful, or you're feeling a sense of awe, or you're laughing a lot, or you're really engaged in something. Then that's a good life, So it's different positive emotions. It's also pleasure, right? Which I have not talked about so far, but having a great, nice bath on a cold day, having a nice warm shower, right? Or eating something really tasty, listening to something that's beautiful. etc. Okay, so pleasure, positivity, but also more than that, doing something that you feel is the right thing to do, even
Right.
if it is coming at a cost to your pleasure or positivity. Maybe you feel that, yeah, I want to become the best interviewer I can be. Okay, and in order to do that, you actually read through the person you're interviewing, his or her autobiography, like you did, right? So that you can ask good questions. Okay,
Right.
make it
Yeah.
an useful, engaging experience, not just for you, but for the person being interviewed, but also for the audience.
Right.
Okay, so that reading the autobiography may not be that engaging, may not be that interesting,
Mm.
especially just before you began. I mean, say, should I read it? I'm feeling lazy. Maybe I should watch a Netflix show. But taking that step to do it and being diligent about it, is going to come at a cost to your pleasure,
Right.
most likely. Okay, you're going to put in some hard work. You're going to maybe miss sleep, etc. But doing it because it's the meaningful thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So you can think of all of those as being under the umbrella of happiness. So it's a little bit complex in that way, but
Mm.
people understand it. It's not like so
Mm.
complex that people have to say, whoa, 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 wait a second, let me just digest that. I don't really understand it. No,
Right.
I think that people understand that happiness can come in many varieties, and sometimes for the sake of longer term happiness, you have to sacrifice shorter term happiness. And if you don't do that, then you're going to suffer in the long term, etc. People understand that.
Right. Right. Right.
It's not so complex that people don't understand it. So that's what I mean by happiness. Now,
Ah.
there is a particular kind of emotion that I think most people gravitate towards when they think about the term happiness. Okay, so for many people it's love, right? That for me, happiness means being with my loved ones. If you go ask your mom, she'll probably say that, having my children
Mm.
around me, etc. For me, happiness has a lot to do with freedom. Okay, freedom over my own mind, freedom over my own instincts, and the sense of kind of light-hearted joy, right?
Mm.
Where I can afford to take things in a not serious fashion. Okay, I think that's a
Right.
very important definition for me of happiness. So
Right. Yeah.
the best moments in my life when I'm totally chilled out, where I don't have huge obligations that are kind of hanging over my head. So
Mm.
I tend to not take those on. Okay, or even if I take them on, I tend not to put that pressure on myself that this has to be done. So ultimately, it boils down to, in my definition, not taking yourself too seriously, even if you're doing serious things. Okay,
Right. Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So now, Professor, and in a minute, I'll come to the topic of meaning and purpose. And I heard your TED talk as well your talk at Google, and you mentioned about the aspect of meaning and purpose. But before that, I read a paper in UCLA, in which they mentioned about a research wherein they saw people who had more of eudaimonic happiness, which is the happiness comes from serving, and what you mentioned about serving other people, and compared to the happiness which you get more of the consummatory, kind of that lifestyle. And both happiness had a different result in the in your immune system, in terms of the first happiness led to the activation of genes which promoted health, right, which was more of antibodies and antiviral genes, right? So even in happiness, what is the source of happiness? Though the feeling remains the same, right? I may go and buy a thing in a shop, or maybe watch a movie, I feel happy, and I go and help somebody, I feel happy. So at a surface level, it looks me to the same thing, but deeper, at a level of genes, there is an impact happening, right? So what is your view on that one?
I don't even know superficially if it's the same thing. I mean, you could say that I'm happy, but it's really a more specific kind of emotion. When you go and buy something, I think that you have a sense of excitement about the stuff that you've bought. Maybe you want to try it. Maybe you feel a sense of pride that, you own this new brand. Other people are going to look at you and say, oh, wow, he's got an iPhone, must be a big guy. There's a sense of pride. Maybe it's egotistical. When you help
Mm.
somebody out, I think that it's more of a sense of connection, sense of love, etc. So I don't even think that superficially they are the same emotion. Although
Right.
people might use, broadly speaking, this word
Mm.
called happy to refer to both positive emotions. Okay.
And
Um,
the point I was talking this, because a lot of people say, okay, because we know we have to be happy, let's go and buy stuff, let's go and party all day, right? That's what people associate with happiness, right? But there is a difference in what happiness possibly in a more long-term sustained permanent happiness, and what is a short-term sensory pleasure possibly. So if you can just throw light on that part.
so, look, I mean, I don't necessarily think that in some broad sense, pleasure is inferior to helping other people out. I don't think that that's true, in my opinion. Okay, I think that there are certain practical reasons why a life in which you're only pursuing pleasure may not be a good life. I'm not drawing any moral conclusions about this. Okay, just from purely kind of utilitarian perspective, if you will. That is that if your objective is to maximize the happiness you get out of life, from that perspective, it's better not to only focus on getting pleasure in your life. Okay, why? Because pleasure in particular, okay, and by pleasure, what I mean is the positivity that you get out of positive sensory stimuli, right? Eating something tasty, or having a good massage, or things like that. The problem with that is that it has a very short shelf life, right? Yeah. The 100th bite of a chocolate is not going to be as tasty as the first bite, and it shouldn't be, because if it was, then you'd probably end up eating, I don't know, 1,000 chocolates, and you'll die, right? So there's an inbuilt kind of physical mechanism to prevent you from over-consuming things that are pleasurable, because it's harmful for you, okay? And that's called hedonic adaptation. Yes. And pleasure is most susceptible to hedonic adaptation. And so what it means is that pleasure can never last for a very long time, okay? You can have pleasure from eating, but there's only so much pleasure you can get from it in a moment, and then you have to shift to something else. You can get pleasure from listening to a beautiful song, and then you can get pleasure from a nice shower, and then you can get pleasure from smelling something beautiful, and so on. You have to keep shifting, okay? You can't stay on one thing, okay? Right. With positive emotions, I think even though many of them do have a similar kind of a shelf life, it's a longer kind of shelf life, okay? So for example, love in particular, it seems like has a long, you can kind of experience love for a much longer time, okay? Imagine friendships, right? Platonic love. Yes. Your friends don't get boring with age. If you get adapted to your friends, you might say that, hey, I'm done with this guy, right? Yeah. Like the 100 piece of chocolate, I've had enough of this guy. I don't want to go back to him. No, I mean, usually friendships become better with time, like old wine, they say, right? So the shelf life is longer. And there are certain kinds of emotions which don't even maybe have a term or a name in English, like ananda, your name, right? This kind of joyful disposition or bliss that you get from being connected with everything and recognizing the ultimate truth of things, right? And going beyond the Maya. That kind of a bliss, which comes from just experiencing life as it's happening in the moment, right? And connecting to it, and having a sense of awe of the beauty of creation. That kind of a bliss can last forever. You could be in the state of blissful, theoretically for a very long time. And so if you look at that whole gamut, I think that the pleasure that you get from helping other people out, okay, what you call eudaimonia, right? It's not necessarily only from helping other people out, but generally, it comes from a more meaningful life, not just the pursuit of pleasure, not a hedonic, but a eudaimonic kind of an approach. That tends to last longer, and there's many reasons for why that tends to last longer. One of the big reasons is that when you do something good for other people, they have a tendency to want to reciprocate. They want to do something good for you in return, and so it sets up a kind of a virtuous cycle. Whereas if you eat a pleasurable chocolate, the chocolate doesn't want to do anything back to you, right? I mean, so there's some systematic reasons for why helping other people out tends to propagate the positive emotions versus pursuit of pleasure tends to kill it faster. So not even getting into the morality and ethicality of it, purely by looking at it from a utilitarian perspective, it seems that a life in which you have a nicer balance between the two. I'm not saying that, just do good things to other people and forget about pleasure, suffer. That's not a good, I'm not a proponent of self-abnegation and self-sacrifice and things like that. I think you need to have a rich life, you need to have a full life. And when pleasure does come your way, right, enjoy it. That's the whole idea of the Epicurean philosophy, actually, if you think about it.
I have so many things to ask, because of the time, I have to also go to the main topic, but again, I'm going to catch hold of you sometime later. So now, somebody who's listening to this episode right now, possibly in this Corona time would have lost their job, right? And having a kind of stress. To that person, what would you say about, at this point of time, about happiness? Because the research shows that happiness also improves your productivity, your money life, abundance also increases. And the topic about meaning and purpose, I'm going to bring those two things as well inside. So somebody listening to it right now who is in the verge of losing a job in a stressful situation, what is your advice on what practices on the number one, the concept of happiness, the purpose, the meaning, that in a broader way, and then the application of it, how that's going to help somebody? Because they say, look, Avinash, this is all good, but right now I'm stressful because I'm going to lose a job, right? So how would you frame this for people like that?
See, I think that even if you're going through a lot of stress and job uncertainty, I think that for that person too would recognize that the best thing that they can do right now is be hopeful, be resilient, be optimistic, have the energy to take the next step, whatever that next step is. Okay, say that you've already lost your job. The next step could be, sending out your resume to people who might potentially hire you. Okay, or learning something in this window of time that you have that is going to make you a more attractive candidate for an upcoming job. Okay, so things like that, rather than just staying depressed and staying in your bed and not being able to kind of move out, etc. I think most people would recognize that there is a good way to approach this and a bad way to approach this. Okay, now of course you have to be self-compassionate, and it's totally understandable if you're feeling depressed and you want to spend a couple of days, maybe even a week, wallowing in self-pity and lying in your bed. But sooner rather than later, you have to kind of get out of that, snap out of that, and take some action. Okay, and I think that's where happiness comes in handy. I think the positive emotions, as Barbara Fredrickson, in her book Positivity puts it, they're like micronutrients. They're not like carbohydrates or protein, but they're like vitamins. Okay, they give you this essential thing that's very, very important. Otherwise, something important is missing in your life. The more kind of essential big nutrients could be things like whether your family's relationships are good and you have enough money in the bank, etc. But if you don't have a general level of emotional positivity, then you're not going to have that resilience. You're not going to have that optimism and positivity for you to get to start working. Okay, so I can talk about some strategies that people who are in that situation can employ as well, but I'm just purely talking about the importance of happiness, even in, perhaps especially in, moments of uncertainty and stress, like the ones that you pointed out.
Right. So what are a couple of practices you suggest to people like that? Like how they'll start? Because in that moment, the state is so negative. You're feeling so down and you know the right thing to be done, but you don't have the will and the motivation to do the right thing, right? So what are the, maybe if the word is quick fix, I don't know if that is the right term to use, but what are strategies which can be done right now to instantly feel better, feel more hopeful, and then go for it?
Yeah, so it kind of at some level depends on the personality of the person. Okay, some of us are more productivity oriented, and we feel happier when we feel that we've been productive, we have not wasted time. And for those kind of people, I would say that, carve out 2-3 hours a day. It doesn't have to be like huge amount of time, but 2-3 hours a day when you say that, okay, between 10 a.m. and 12 noon every day, I'm just going to do something that is work oriented, that's productivity oriented. Okay, maybe it's polishing up my resume, maybe it's sending out my resume to a bunch of people, maybe it's doing a course. Okay, and if you still have your job, then maybe it's working on your job, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is one. The second is to identify a bunch of things that reliably put you in a positive state. Okay, so it could be talking to your nanny on the phone because she always cheers you up because she's lighthearted and put things in perspective. Okay, maybe it's catching up with an old friend on Zoom. Okay, maybe it is having a nice shower. For me, taking a shower almost always kind of makes my mood just a little bit better. 10% better.
Same.
Yeah, right.
I take twice a day, and it puts my energy to a different level altogether. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it's listening to some songs, old songs that are on your favorite playlist. So you have to identify.
Sorry to interrupt you. Sometimes people say like things like you mentioned right now, taking a shower, talking to her, or calling somebody. They would say this is too futile activity to be done right now. So from a scientific perspective, there is research which shows that even that 2 minutes of happiness changes your biochemistry, things at a deeper level.
Yeah, it does. They talk about this, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. Okay. So if you already shoot yourself in the foot and say that, look, I mean, this is not going to really help me get a job. What is this? Talking to my nanny is going to make me feel good in the moment, but it's not really solving the big problem that I have. Then, you're not going to get anything done. Okay, stop kind of like having those kind of thoughts and say that, okay, right now I'm not feeling so good. I'm going to do small things, little small things, each of which maybe only improve my happiness 1%. But when I put all of those things together, right, maybe it's going to improve my happiness by 20%, okay, which is pretty big, actually, okay? You'll be making a different decision if you're 20% happier than you would be if you're not, okay? Maybe you'll actually send out the resume at the end of it, okay, rather than not doing it, and that could be the difference. So the idea is to, like, there's no silver bullet, okay, for happiness. As with any big goal in your life, there is no one thing that is going to suddenly solve it. They say, oh, you want to lose weight, just, avoid sugar altogether, okay, or exercise for 2 hours every day. No, that's not going to help, okay? It's not going to solve the problem. Any complex goal is going to have all of the above as the approach, okay? You're going to have to do a bunch of things, and happiness is the loftiest goal there is, okay? No surprise that people like the Buddha had to leave the kingdom in order to pursue it, right? Because it's not an easy goal to achieve, okay? And so if you set yourself the goal of happiness, then you're going to have to arrive at the conclusion that I'm going to have to stay disciplined. I'm going to have to be smart. I'm going to have a bunch of strategies, each of which may work only a little bit in certain circumstances. But I'm going to employ each strategy depending on the circumstance. And altogether, overall, it's going to push me in the right direction. Not 100%, not 100% of the time, but overall, my life trajectory is going to be in that direction, okay? That is the truth, okay? There is no silver bullet. There is no one thing that is going to make you constantly, instantly happy.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about so many things like mirror neurons and negativity dominance, but I want to respect your time as well. So now I want to talk about the 5 things in which you mentioned about abundance mindset, right? So can you just maybe in 2 minutes time dwell on that part as well, the abundance mindset, why that is a very critical aspect to people to follow, to develop possibly?
Yeah, so you can think about many things that make you happy, and most of the time we feel that external circumstances need to change for us to be happy. I need to be married to a certain such and such a person, or have so much money, or hold this kind of a job, etc. And all of those do contribute to your happiness, no doubt about it. Okay, they do make your life better. But perhaps the single biggest determinant of your happiness is your mindset. We already talked about this, right? Yes. The attitude you have towards life, whether you feel you're somebody that is lucky, and that you get good breaks in life, and the universe smiles upon you and gives you good things, and God is kind, if you believe in God. Or do you feel that life is malign, and any chance it gets to hurt you, it's like the universe is like a cat and you're the mouse, and it keeps playing around with you, toying around with you, and one day it just eats you up, okay? If you feel that way, then you have the negative mindset, okay, the scarcity orientation. And there's just a lot of research showing that your mindset, what you bring to the table, your attitude, has a huge influence on your happiness. Not very surprising, right? The same situation, you can put 2 people in it, and one person will have a more positive attitude, the other person will have a less positive attitude. So, that is very, very important. And I call it, the abundance mindset, where you feel that I'm taken care of, by and large, most of the time, I'm taken care of. I have everything I need, more than enough, in fact. So what can I do for other people, as opposed to I don't have enough? You're going around with a begging bowl, asking the universe, asking other people to fill it in with goodies, right? And there are strategies for developing the abundance mindset. I think the best strategy that I've discovered, it takes a little bit of time to do it, but the best strategy I've discovered is to just write 3 good things that happen to you on an everyday basis in your journal. Okay, if you do it for even 6 weeks, which I know sounds like a lot of time, but in the large scheme of things, if you look at your whole life, it's not such a long time. 6 weeks of diligent maintenance of 3 good things in your journal every day. Write about 3 good things that happen to you. Is going to fine tune your mind to look at it from the standpoint of abundance rather than from the standpoint of scarcity.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Professor, no, I think I'm going to get you again in this podcast sometime later with your bit of more time. But, my dream is to start a university where we get scientists and yogis together to do a research and develop a new way of education. And I think I see a very amazing person in front of me right now to be one of those people in the university possibly. So yes, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this show, and I hope people who are listening to this gets more hope, more happiness, and more strategies. I encourage people to really do your Coursera course, which is, I think, free of cost, plus your book also. And how people reach out to you? What is the best way to reach out to you online?
They can go to my website, happysmarts.com.
Okay.
HAPPYSMARTS. There's an S at the end, .com. I do have a Facebook community as well.
Right.
And the Facebook page is also called Happy Smarts. So if
Right.
you go to those, I think that might be the best way to connect.
Sure. And what is one your dream to impact the world? Do you have a dream like that? One line, like what is the impact you want to leave on this world before you leave this planet?
Nothing really. I love Mother Teresa saying in this context, we cannot all do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. I just
Right.
want to do small things with great love, and whatever happens at the end, the universe has been around for a while. It's going to exist for a while.
Yeah, Professor. Thank you so much for your time. I really respect and thank you so much. I hope to see you again. God bless. Take care, Professor.
Take care. Bye bye.